There we go. Okay, so for those who don't know, Green Building Store has been an inexorable part in a lot of ways, I think, for ACB for many years, through the championing of particularly of Chris and Bill. And those who don't know us, welcome. Ostensibly what we do, I would suggest, is provide the essential components, the physical, practical components of delivering high-performance building. So Passivhaus standard, ACB new build standard, so MVHR, triple glazed windows, airtightness, and specialist insulation. Those are the key parts. And I guess the fifth ingredient is the knowledge and expertise that goes together to actually bring those things in a unit. So we very much believe in the power of a design-led supply chain. So when you talk to us, we're very keen on understanding the context of what it is you're doing so that actually what you get actually relates to your project and works well. You can have an amazing performance window, you can have an amazing performance wall, you get the two incorrectly interfaced and you're massively compromising what you could have achieved. So that's the same sort of across the board. And we believe tying that together is really, really important. Jeff did allude right at the beginning that we got our sort of proddings a little bit late. I've tried to incorporate them in the title down there. Unfortunately, the titles are now changed as well, and you've no crib sheet. So don't worry about that little green bit, it'll be fine. Just so you understand where we are on the sort of spectrum, if you like, we're completely committed to high-performing, low-energy buildings. We consider the minimum standard is ACB new build, and that's very much where we plan to remain. We also, the point about sticking health and comfort in at the front end of that, I'll try and come to later, but it's just to do with language, and I think a call for all of us perhaps on how we do that. For those who don't know, we've been around a while, pioneering Passivhaus since 1995, I think there's a lot that we've drawn on as a result of that. The other thing that we're focusing on a lot more as well now is actually selling performance over product. What I mean by that, let's give MVHR as a good example. We understand that when we're dealing with high-performing buildings, MVHR becomes a critical part of the ventilation system. In order to design that properly, it's very easy to trip off the tongue and say, yeah, a bit of ducting, plug a heat exchange and fans unit at the end of it, job done. But in reality, actually, the ducting is a critical part of the MVHR system. Arguably, 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the performance of your system relates to your ducting. Once it's in there, it's part of the fabric of the building, and you can have some really quite excellent ducting and plug in a poor system and the whole thing will still perform very well. Conversely to that, you can actually end up with some very poor ducting and you can plug the best system you've got in the market on the end, and sadly you will not get the level of performance you were hoping for. So when we're designing MVHR system, we work on flow rates, we work on decibel ratings, and those are the things that we're going to guarantee we commission at the end, so you actually know that the product worked, the solution worked as it was intended, and that's really important to us. So we believe very much in this empowering of the customer, and so it's not actually about what our products are, it's very much about what they do, and trying to kind of bring all that together. It's a slightly clumsy way, but I'll give it a whirl. It's 21 degrees, and what I mean by that is, think of 21 degrees as the optimum temperature that as human beings we generally need, benefit from. Particularly if you're more vulnerable, it's rather essential, whether that's you're very young or much more older. In order to maintain that, not just in winter, throughout the year, so we're not overheating, it does mean that all those component parts within your building need to come together in the right way. So having a target as simple as 21 is a sensible way of kind of looking at it. Hope that makes sense. We very much believe in collaboration, design and delivery. So who doesn't love a Venn diagram? But it is essential that we do bring these together. That's very much where we believe we sit. Obviously, if you're the architect, then you're in the center. It's more to the point that it's the overlap, okay, of those things. And those are all the people we're trying to interact with. That's really quite important. And then, slide's gone weird. Okay, don't know what happened there. There was a question of staying competitive, and that was primarily about innovation, simplification and accessibility. Because I said we're very much occupying the pace of high-performing building, I don't care if the big house builders haven't caught up yet, they won't. Primarily their business model is value of land conversion. Let's be quite clear about that. You buy land, you build a house, you sell it for more money, as in the land. If there was a more effective way of doing that, they would do that. They wouldn't build houses. That is the sad truth of it. They will eventually have to do this because just the commerciality of it won't stack up any other way. But while they can avoid that, we'll continue to do it, and we'll continue to innovate in order to make sure that we can provide, hopefully, the solutions more accessibly. That's the point. But there's another thing about simplicity and accessibility, and I think that's in communication and the way we need to talk to people. It's very, we're always quite happy to talk about 15 kilowatt hours per metre square per year, aren't we? But as soon as you talk to anybody in the street, that's straight over their head. If you tell them that, so I learned this at the Passivhaus Trust Awards the other day, there was a lass who just had a house built and was talking to the architect who designed it. And she said, I can't believe my heating and my hot water is cheaper than my internet. Now, that's the kind of thing that most people in the street could probably get a hold of, rather than just saying it's low energy. And what do you mean by low energy? It's a bit less than what I use at the moment. It's like, no, it's a hell of a lot less than you use at the moment. So that's a rhetorical question because I'm not going to answer any. But it was only just to say that I hadn't been able to shoehorn in people, which was one of the questions that Jeff had asked. For me, well, on a personal note, the main reason I joined GBS was actually because of the people. People are key. There's no other way around it. And so I'm passionate about making sure that actually you do try and remunerate them in the right way, but not just remuneration. It's also about the environment in which they work, the way they feel valued. And frankly, I think it's the long run. I think as soon as you start trying to compromise on that, it's short-term thinking, and sooner or later, it's going to fold. The last question, which was another title that changed, big fish, little fish. I think mainly it's to do with, I think you did actually touch on at the beginning. I think it's very easy to flick one way or the other. To say, oh, no, big's not good. But actually, I think there's a lot of space for it. I think it's more to do with the why. So if the reason why you're getting a succession of companies bought up and accumulated in one is purely so that they can get a return on EBITDA in N years, I would really begin to question that. If, however, the reason why they're building up the bigger companies because they believe in actually what these collective companies are doing is actually the right way to go, then I'd say actually probably size is helpful. And there is definitely places where size does make, you can actually deliver more than you can when you're smaller. Not least perhaps treat your staff in a different way, just because you have the capacity to do so. That said, see previous conversation earlier, I'm not a believer in growth for the sake of growth. That everything has its limits. So I think that was it. There we go.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Very much. Yeah. So thanks, Andy. I mean, on that, just to pick up on that point, obviously Green Building Store has been going through this kind of transition post kind of acquisition, and it's fascinating to see how, because the company would be regarded by, I'm sure, many AECB members as having particular kind of values, how those values are maintained or remain part of the DNA of the company now. You know, and with you at the helm, I'd be interested to know your thoughts on that.
Well, actually, it's interesting. One of the things that was asked of me when I was asked to step into this role was it was that question actually, how are you going to maintain the values that are key to GBS? I guess it's something that you genuinely wrestle with on a sort of daily basis because you're trying to strike the tension. I'm a great believer in the fact that it's quite clear GBS are and certainly were the pioneers. And our customers will manage what you might call the early adopters. So that's people who basically say, I want to do something better on the planet. Oh, my home has a massive impact. Oh, I found this standard, it's called Passivhaus. You do Passivhaus, sell me your stuff. Okay? They've kind of done all the homework, really. I'm massively generalising, so please bear with, but it's not too far from the truth. These days, we generally get a phone call that goes, oh, I'd like to do something better. Heard about low energy, what's that? Okay, so it's a completely different kind of thing. So actually, I'm quite passionate about this idea that it's great what we've done, but if we can't do it at some greater scale, perhaps we're missing the point, perhaps we're unable to really deliver what we need to deliver. So I think it's more to do with my personal wrestle is between those two parts. It's making sure that we don't compromise on the core value stuff, while at the same time trying to make it more accessible so hopefully people can do. That said, my wrestles also include those people who own us and you just have to fight your corner and so on and so forth. But it's not too much of a fight.
Thank you. Yeah. It's on that point, this issue of scale. There was a report some of the members here may have seen in The Guardian last week of an interactive map of Europe and outdoor air quality levels across Europe. You can look at the levels in your own town, specifically looking at PM 2.5 levels. And it's horrible news, sorry for anyone who hadn't heard it. I think there was maybe some very remote parts of Scotland that were at acceptable levels, but basically everywhere else in the UK was at least quite shit to terribly shit, and then that's the same across Europe, So that got me thinking. I mean, obviously, in the same way that road safety isn't about everybody having a big tank of a car and be damned to the consequences outside, the poor person who you happen to run into. Obviously, air quality, we have to kind of tackle outdoor air quality, but are we getting to a situation now where filtering, properly filtering the supply air is kind of a prerequisite to protect our health?
Well, that's a great question. That's always a pre-prompt actually, because one of the conversations that I was said earlier, we've kind of flipped around a bit. It's not the only conversation we have, but rather than saying you want a low energy building, therefore you need air tightness, therefore you need mechanical ventilation with heat recovery because you don't want to waste the heat. Actually, it reverses round now. So we say you want actually controlled air coming into your building, not uncontrolled air. The way to do that is to improve the air tightness. If you've done that, you actually need far more effective ventilation. We suggest mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. Oh, by the way, save a bit of energy. So it's kind of like we think actually the health discussion is actually a really, really important one. And let's be honest, it does tend to focus the mind a bit more than, okay, energy bills going up helped in a kind of unhelpful way, but actually health, it's far more emotive, and it gets people going. So I think actually you could see people moving far more to effective performing homes because of a health concern rather than perhaps for an environmental concern or for a low energy concern, both of which are clearly still legitimate, but where people are starting, you've kind of got to meet people where they are. I think that's something we perhaps forget.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Andy.
Pleasure.
Okay.
Cheers.